The day you died, I went into the dirt, into the lightless hibernaculum where bees, striped black and gold, sleep out the blizzard like hieratic stones, and the ground is hard. It was good for 20 years, that wintering, as if you never existed, as if I came God-fathered into the world from my mother's belly. Her wide bed wore the stain of divinity. I had nothing to do with the guilt or anything when I warmed back under my mother's heart.
Small as a doll, in my dress of innocence, I lay dreaming your epic, image by image. Nobody died or withered on that stage. Everything took place in a durable whiteness. The day I woke on Churchyard Hill. I found your name, I found your bones and all enlisted in a cramped necropolis. Your speckled stone is skewed by an iron fence.
In this charity ward, this poorhouse, where the dead crowd foot to foot, head to head, no flower breaks the soil. This is Azalea Path. A field of burdock opens to the south. 6 feet of yellow gravel cover you. The artificial red sage does not stir in the basket of plastic evergreens they put at the headstone next to yours, nor does it rot. Although the rains dissolve a bloody dye, the ersatz petals drip, and they drip red.
Another kind of redness bothers me. The day your slack sail drank my sister's breath, the flat sea purpled like that evil cloth my mother unrolled at your last homecoming. I borrow the stilts of an old tragedy. The truth is, one late October, at my birth cry, a scorpion stung its head, an ill-starred thing. My mother dreamed you face down in the sea.
The stony actor's poison pause for breath. I brought my love to bear, and then you died. It was the gone green ate you to the bone. My mother said, you died like any man. How shall I age into that state of mind? I am the ghost of an infamous suicide, my own blue razor rusting in my throat. Oh, pardon the one who knocks for pardon at your gate, father, your hound bitch, daughter, friend. It was my love that did us both to death.
This poem is showing that the denial of the death of a family member makes the impact of the eventual acknowledgement of his or her death more severe and can lead to depression and possible suicide. It is also showing that those who have lost someone often look for someone to blame and face an internal conflict. It is also important to note that the speaker has an obsession with her father.
The feelings that this poem evokes from us are that we become disappointed in the speaker's lack of improvement in life and the fact that she lost the battle in coping with the loss of her father.
Plath shows the main effect by using specific tones, blurred devices, and imagery. These convey the speaker's feelings and draw attention to certain details that are important to the thematic message and also causes the reader to experience the poem and not just read it.
In stanza 1, a reminiscent tone evokes feelings of longing in an easier time in her life. She reflects the time period during which she denied the existence of the death of her father. The speaker describes her denial as a lightless hibernaculum in a wintering that lasts for 20 years. Similes, such as the comparison with the hieratic stones not being touched under the hard ground, are used to draw attention to this extended period of time. Winter imagery suggests the numbness of her heart, and a reference to hibernation shows the speaker's attempt to hide herself from reality. This imagery can also be referenced to the arrival of the bee box, where bees symbolize her thoughts inside her head. In this stanza, there is also religious comparison to her mother being the Virgin Mary, describing that she was God-fathered into the world and the bed wore the satin of divinity. This first stanza causes the reader to feel disappointed in the speaker's decision to hide from reality. However, her actions can also be understandable because it is natural for animals to go into hibernation to avoid extreme conditions, mentally and physically.
The first highlight that we should consider is the first line of the poem. The day you died, I went into the dirt is very important because it is the source of a lot of her pain. It shows the impact that her father's death had on her. The image of her hiding and burying herself, choosing to isolate herself, sets the tone for the rest of the poem.
The second stanza begins with the critical tone of the speaker. We look into the narrator's young and childish mind. The line "small as a doll" is a simile used to describe herself as one smaller in stature and importance compared to the epic stature of her father. This size imagery in comparison to her father is also seen in other Plath poems. In My Dress of Innocence can figuratively mean she puts on a dress to cover the guilt buried deep within her that she refuses to recognize. The speaker then recounts her father's life and stages as if it were a play. The word epic is an allusion to epic poems of Greek mythology and further portrays her father as an ever-powerful hero. Her obsession with her father is emphasized with the repetition of image by image, and when she places him on a pedestal of a stage where nobody died or withered, implying perfection. This is further supported by the white color imagery. However, there's a shift in the tone of the poem with the emphasis and repetition of "the day I woke on Churchyard Hill." The Greek underlining of this poem is also continued with the use of the word necropolis in place of cemetery. References to Greek mythology is typical of Plath in her poetry, like in Colossus. There's a great contrast between what she previously thought of her father and of how seeing his speckled stone shattered her belief of how grand and godly her father was. This alliteration with the speckled stone also draws attention to this important detail. The second stanza causes the reader to feel pity towards the speaker. It is basically a child finding a dead body. How does one react to that? We feel sympathetic because the speaker held her father on such a high pedestal, higher than her own importance, and yet she finds him buried in a sad graveyard.
It is important to pay attention to the line, "The day I woke on Churchyard Hill." This is an important change in tone and shift in the setting of the poem. By coming across this cemetery, she is forced to come back into reality. The tone shifts to one of sorrow and despair. This is when the speaker's pain truly begins.
The third stanza creates a depressing tone when describing the graveyard as very disdainful and melancholic. The image of her father's grave disturbs her so deeply because she believes he deserves a better resting place. She describes Azalea Path with repetition as very bleak, a poor house where the dead crowd foot to foot, head to head. This shows the narrator's scorn for Azalea Path when she comes to realize that her father is buried here with the poor, as if his life had no more significance than that of a poor man. The contrast between 6 feet of yellow gravel cover you and the artificial red sage does not stir in the basket of plastic evergreens shows that her father's grave has not been visited, and this is her first time visiting his grave since his death. Azalea Path leaks dryness, a place where no flower breaks the soil and the ersatz petals drip red in the rain. The red color imagery in this poem represents the anger that the speaker feels. In this stanza, she despises the idea of her father being buried as a normal man. Because the flowers are not real, it dictates to us that she never went through the proper stages of mourning. Nature imagery is seen in many other Plath poems. The third stanza causes the reader to continue to feel pity and sympathy towards the narrator. The setting described is so sad and depressing, a place where nothing can grow. One can only imagine how a sight such as this could affect the narrator, especially since she viewed her father as a godly figure.
The fourth stanza evokes a tone of resentment with the allusion to Greek tragedy. The speaker is conflicted between blaming herself and the feeling anger towards her mother. The red color imagery is used again to symbolize the anger the narrator feels. The line, "the day your slacks sail, up until your last homecoming," are about the Greek tragedy of Agamemnon, a hero from the Trojan War. He sacrificed his own daughter, which is Electra's sister, to be able to sail to Troy. Electra's mother killed him when he returned home from Troy as revenge for murdering their daughter. Plath goes on to write, "I borrow the silts of an old tragedy," which could mean that the narrator might have had an Electra complex, loving her ever-distant father too much and hating her mother. At the end of stanza 4, she connects his death with a superstition connecting to scorpions, stating that her father was doomed as soon as she was born. She is torn between blaming herself for his death and blaming her mother in this moment. The last line, "My mother dreamed your face down in the sea," challenges the superstition from the previous lines and creates a problem. Was it the speaker's birth or was it her mother that caused the death of her father? The fourth stanza causes the reader to feel uncomfortable and anxious because there is a bad omen and tragedy in reference to the speaker's perspective to her mother.
The tone of the fifth stanza is bitter as the speaker concludes the poem. This bitterness comes from the speaker's feelings of betrayal or despair, as the climax is built as the story actors poised and paused for breath, and she brought her love to bear, only to be followed by his death. These lines can be connected to the image of her father as a main character on the stage back in stanza 2, where the other actors in the scene are now anticipating actions of the main character. The abrupt statement of his death adds to the feeling of quickly arising distress in the speaker. The speaker is pushed into further heartache with her mother's discomforting assurance that her father died like any man. This portrayal of her father as a common, ordinary man clashes with the speaker's idea that her father is a necessary part of her life. She expresses that she is living in the suicide shadow as a ghost. Similar supernatural creatures can be seen in other Plath poems such as The Vampire and Daddy. The speaker also labels his death as a suicide and contemplates killing herself when she states that she will be the one who knocks for pardon at the gates of hell. Hell and death imagery is a frequently recurring theme in Plath poems, including Lady Lazarus and Old Lady's Home. Her loyalty is expressed as her self-declaration of being her father's hound bitch daughter friend. Even after all the speaker has been through, she still wants to follow her father into death. The last line, "It was my love that did us both to death," can be seen as a relatable to childish notions that kids can control the world around them, which also reinforce the idea of her guilty feelings for her father's death. She takes on a defeated feeling by the end from the death of her father, as if fate had meant for him to die even though his passing was not foreseen. The fifth stanza causes the reader to feel hopelessness. The speaker expresses death imagery through the doors of hell and with ideas of suicide. This evokes a feeling that there is no turning back and no way to return to the durable whiteness from before.
This line is important because it shows how, through all that the speaker went through, she still feels loyal to her father and wants to follow him into death. One must also consider what the speaker means when she says that, "My love did us both to death." Would death in this case be physical or emotional, or both? One could argue that this is another emphasis of the speaker thinking on a suicidal level.